Physicists will also agree, many of them, that there's no time and space. We count time on Earth based on the rotation of the Earth on its axis and the orbit around the sun. So one rotation is 1 day, one orbit is 1 year. So that's the time on Earth. But anywhere else, time is different. Now, if you go by a black hole, time is completely different. So time and space is not what we experience here. So there's no time in space and there's no time in the spirit world. And because I believe that we are, there's multiple dimensions we're in this dimension, spirit is in another dimension. Most people just can't see it. It's kind of overlapping. They're not experiencing time like we are.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Nicole Willett with us on the show today. Nicole's a medium with a background in biology and astronomy. She combines her knowledge of science and spirituality to help people grieving the loss of a loved one. It's always fun to have a conversation with another medium. And I'm going to be asking Nicole about her journey, her techniques, and to share some of her favorite interactions with spirit. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go chat with Nicole. Nicole, welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled you took the time to join us today.
I am so grateful and so honored to be a guest on Ask Julie Ryan.
Oh, good. You have a quote on your website from psychic medium Anton St. Martin, hope I pronounced his name right, which says, quote, "Mediumship channels guidance from those who have gone before, not only for the sake of those who are here, but also for those yet to come," end quote. I thought that was great. What does that mean to you? And why did you choose to put it in your marketing materials?
Well, to me, it means, because I believe there is no time in spirit, that even though someone is yet to come, we still have contact with them spiritually. We still, like when I had my kids, it was as if I had known them all along before they were born. And so like they had been with me the whole time. So it doesn't matter what order linearly we're born on this three-dimensional plane. We all know each other in spirit, all in our soul family. That's what it means. And I want to credit my daughter-in-law for giving that quote to me.
Oh, it's a great quote. When I was doing my prep for our conversation today, I thought, what a great quote. Yeah, that was a good one. Say more about feeling like you knew your kids before they were born. Can you give us some examples of perhaps when you first saw them or when they were in utero or even as they were growing?
When my oldest, when I was pregnant, I felt like I could see what he looked like, and I felt like has just always been there with me. I mean, as if I had known him throughout the millennia. Like it's almost, there's no words to describe how it feels. He was just connected to me spiritually all along. And it's just a bond that's inexplicable if you haven't experienced it, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think most mothers and probably a lot of fathers may feel the same way.
Yeah. I was on a plane one time when my son Jonathan was little. He was maybe 3 months old, maybe 4 months old. And I was sitting in the back of the plane and the plane wasn't full. We were flying across country. It was at night. I was holding him in my arms and I was just watching him sleep. And there was a woman across the aisle and she said, "I don't know that I've ever seen a mother look so lovingly at their baby." And I said, "Oh, well, thank you for saying that. But yeah, I feel that way." And I told him when he was born, I held him in my arms. I said, I will do everything in my power to protect you and love you and give you every advantage known to mankind. And I've
Yes.
done my best to do that. So I know what you're talking about. I I have never really heard it described in a feeling kind of a way, or in a way where some women tell me that they'll have almost flashbacks of past lives with their children, where they'll see where they lived, and certainly we can explore that, but have you encountered any of that?
I have not, because I became a medium much later in life. My kids were grown before my mediumship developed. So I have not explored that. Now I am very interested in getting a past life regression. I have not had time to do that yet, but that is definitely on the docket. But
Girl, I can help you with that.
good, I
I
would
don't
love it.
I don't do the regression thing, I do what I call a past life scan, and we ask a couple of questions, and spirit just leads us right to that lifetime, and we get where it was, when it was, what the situation was. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Alright, we'll do that sometime. Okay, so you have a scientific background, and which tells me you're a linear thinker because you got a biology degree and then a master's in astronomy. Hello. Whoa. How did you go from that kind of a discipline, if you will, and tell us about what you were doing in those areas before you learned the woo woo? How did you get from that to becoming a medium? What was your whole journey on that?
Well, I just was listening to you on a previous interview earlier today, and you were talking about the movie Contact. It's my favorite movie.
Me too. I
Favorite.
love it.
I
I
love it.
love it.
I could
Yeah,
watch it a million times.
me too.
And I was always very good at math and science, and I followed that track. Now, my mother, who passed in 1986, she was into some woo-woo. And so she read books about aliens and UFOs and psychic powers and paranormal things. But she passed when I was so young, I don't really know if she would have ever developed into a psychic, but I think she probably would have. Um, so she passed, I followed the science track. And about 6 years ago, maybe 7 years now, about 6 or 7 years ago, I was working for a Humans to Mars organization, which I still am now. And I was a science teacher and an adjunct professor of astronomy at several different, colleges in different areas. And I was just going on with my life thinking, here, I'm just science and Mars and everything's great and everything's wonderful. I had a phone call from a sister, one of my sisters, who said our friend's son passed. I had met the son once when he was a newborn baby. It had been 25 years. I hadn't seen him. I had moved across the country and hadn't seen him. So I knew nothing about him. As soon as she said that, claircognizantly, which I didn't know that at the time, I knew he passed from a drug overdose. I just knew it in my head.
To
And
tell
I didn't
everybody that's listening that doesn't know what claircognizant is, what does that mean?
It's just knowledge in your head and you don't know how it got there.
I call those divine downloads.
And so I had a divine download and I
Right.
didn't say anything to my sister because I, didn't want to hurt her feelings or anything. So a little while later that day, I laid down to take a nap and I was just laying there for a few seconds. And in my head, clairvoyantly, clear seeing, three-dimensionally, full color, red sweater, gold chain, black hair, his head was in my awareness. And he leaned in and said, "Tell my mom I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it." And I sat up. It was so shocking, and I had no idea what was happening. So I called my sister back and I said, "This happened." And a couple of days later, we found out the gentleman had passed from a drug overdose, and I do have permission from his mother to share the story. Um, and she had shown me a picture of him with his red sweater and gold chain she sent me. And so his apology to her was significant because it was an accidental drug overdose. And so I had since gotten trained and given her a reading. So that I just kind of blew off as a one-off and I just went on with my life. A few months later, a friend of the family had a head injury. She was an older lady. We were friends. And she was on hospice care at home. And my other son was with her when she passed. And in my head, I kept seeing this red heart with her name on it, just over and over and relentlessly in my head. And I texted my son, I said, "Oh my God, Dottie won't leave me alone. She keeps putting this red heart in my head and I can't stop. She just won't stop. She won't let up." He texted me a picture of a red heart with her name on it, which is her keychain he had just picked up when she passed that
Yeah.
day, like just a few hours earlier. My knees buckled. I almost passed out. Like, I'll never forget it. And I thought, there's something happening that is not something I've experienced before. So I'm going to do a scientific experiment and I'm going to find out if I can repeat this. So I scoured the internet and I wasn't really sure what to look for. And somehow I realized it was mediumship. And I found a mentor and I started taking classes immediately. And I was doubling up because it kept coming. I kept getting information and I started doing readings in my development classes. And about 6 months later, my mentor said, "You're ready to do private readings." And so I had a friend who had a very large family and a very large friend group set up about 50 people for me to do free readings for practice outside of my development circles. And they went very well. And then my mentor gave me the go ahead and start my own, private paid readings. And I've been doing it ever since. It has changed my life in every way. It has changed my outlook on every single thing. It has made my life so much better in so many ways. Just the way I perceive things, the way I understand things, the way I understand humanity. My compassion is very much different. Not that I wasn't compassionate before, but when you see things from a more spiritual perspective, it just shifts everything.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. What a great story. First of all, when you're saying, you're seeing the red heart with your Dottie's name on it and you're seeing your friend's son, and I'm hearing in my head going, "And you just can't make that stuff up." It's just, I say that all the time. I
Yeah.
You just can't, especially in my classes, you can't make this stuff up that we
Yes.
get. There's just no way. And
No.
especially you with your scientific background, you're thinking, okay, the probability of this happening is slim to none
Yes.
from
Ex
really from a standpoint of doing research on it. And there is lots of research on it. That's just not necessarily in the mainstream. Back to the men on Mars thing, you were doing that more from an astrophysics standpoint, not from a UFO standpoint, is what I'm assuming.
Correct.
Correct.
Planetary astronomy and astrobiology is my
Okay.
specialty.
I
Yes.
know I know how to spell those 2 words, but that's about it. So, I when you were talking about that and that we established that we both love contact, do you believe that part of that interest for you in the astro whatever, the different planets and stuff from a scientific standpoint was leading you to the mediumship thing? Here's why I ask. Oftentimes, and you did this earlier when we first started talking, the, the ETs and the interplanetary whatever, whatever, are globbed in with the medium and psychic and woo-woo space. First
Yes.
of all, why is that? And do you believe that that helped lead you to where you are as far as being able to be a medium? Because, like in Contact in the movie, you now have the ability to communicate with non human intelligent life. So that's a lot. Okay. So answer it however you want. That question kind of went on a long time.
But I understand what you're saying. So I've thought about this a lot actually, because I was drawn to astronomy for since 1988, like obsessively. Like I could not stop thinking about it. and reading books about it, before the internet. And I thought, and then I became a medium. And when I started doing my mediumship meditation, my sitting in the power, I immediately went to space every time when I did it. And I have stories about that, which, are amazing. And I thought, am I going to space in my meditation because I studied astronomy, or did I study astronomy because I've been in space spiritually for so long? And I've come to the conclusion for myself. What feels right for me is I was compelled to study astronomy because of my spiritual background that I didn't know until later when I became a medium. So I feel like that was there and I didn't know it. And now I feel very comfortable. And as far as other sentient beings and aliens, even scientifically, any real scientist who studies this has to concede that the amount of galaxies and planets that we have in this universe is almost uncountable at this point. The number is so big that there is no way we are the only life in this universe. There is absolutely no way that that is true. There must be other sentient beings, whether they exist next door on Mars or, Alpha Centauri or the Andromeda Galaxy is irrelevant. We can learn to communicate with them telepathically if we wish to.
Yeah. I think you're being led. I think that is
Mhm.
absolutely clear as a bell in my mind as I'm listening to you talk, thinking this girl's being led
I agree
with
with you.
all of this. Yeah, with that knowledge base that you have on the planets and the different galaxies far, far away and all of that. Are numbers the universal language?
I've believed that even before I was a medium. And the reason why is if you live on another planet and you don't speak any languages native to Earth, Mandarin, English, Spanish, whatever, you have to be able to communicate. And math, we know one object is one. 0 objects is 0. Whatever symbol that is assigned to that is irrelevant as long as that's the easiest way to communicate. You can show one thing and then you can write your symbol for it. And you can show 2 things and write your symbol for it. That's the easiest way to communicate because if you are traveling from one planet to another, you had to build some way to get there. So you had to know math and engineering to do that. So if they get here, they know math. So they have to know some of the same math we know in order to propel their ship to get to where they're going or teleport or however they're doing it.
Mhm.
So that would be like if you have, in the old days, they used, and I'm sure some people still do it, you would have secret codes when you would send letters for military things, ciphers and things like that. So that would be a way to, have a cipher, a mathematic cipher in order to be able to communicate with each other because we won't speak the same language unless we have our spiritual leaders and thinkers who can communicate telepathically and psychics. That would be a whole other layer to that. Now, will the scientific community or the powers that be allow that if aliens land on the White House lawn per se? You know, will they allow that? Or will they just take it over and be all controlling about it because, government stuff?
They're
So,
afraid of it. Yeah.
right.
Couple of other points in that movie I wanna run by you to get your take on it. When she goes to the other planet in this spaceship, time doesn't exist because there's a black hole that she goes into, which is a vortex, which I see a lot of. Not only when somebody's passing, but in a lot of healings, there are vortices that are present. And I know there's a whole area of math that's way above my pay grade called vortex mathematics. And so that's a universal thing with vortices. number one. Number two, the time it doesn't exist in the spirit world. And she goes through that, and there's like 18 minutes missing from the tape or something. Do you believe that's what they were conveying in that?
Most likely. And physicists will also agree, many of them, that there's no time and space because we count time on Earth based on the rotation of the Earth on its axis and the orbit around the sun. So one rotation is 1 day, one orbit is 1 year. So that's the time on Earth. But anywhere else, time is different. If you've seen the movie Interstellar, have you seen that movie?
I don't think so. Do I need to watch it?
Yeah, it's like contact times a million.
Okay. All right. Interstellar. All right.
They go on a planet next to a black hole. Now, time is different, moves differently depending on the gravitational pull of the planet you're on. So the astronauts at the International Space Station are like a microsecond different time than we are on Earth because they experience less gravity. Now, if you go by a black hole, time is completely different. So time and space is not what we experience here. So if you're just floating through space willy-nilly for some reason, there's no clock like we have here. It's a very different thing. So there's no time and space, and there's no time in the spirit world. And because I believe that we are, there's multiple dimensions of we're in this dimension, spirit is in another dimension. Most people just can't see it. It's kind of overlapping. They're not experiencing time like we are. So that's my, I guess, complicated answer to that.
No, but that's fabulous because I never heard that before and I never thought about it. But it makes total sense. I live in Birmingham, Alabama, and Huntsville's a couple of hours north of me. Have you been to the NASA?
Not the one in Alabama, but I
Oh,
don't live far from Kennedy.
it's fabulous. Come up, I'll take you up there.
Okay.
And so Dr. von Braun, of course, was the one who was the rocket scientist from
Right.
Germany that brought all those guys, and they did the Apollo program. And some of the engineers that worked with him when he was older and they were young, they're still alive and they're retired and they are docents at the museum. And last time I was up there, I had family in town and I took them up there. I stood there and talked to one of them for an hour.
It's
And it was
amazing.
fascinating what was going on, the whole story of all of that. So I've always been fascinated with that. And then the other thing about the Contact movie, two things. Number one, she's able to communicate with the aliens telepathically, which we do spiritually, right? And where we communicate telepathically. And I always have been under the impression that whoever wrote that screenplay, and I know it was Carl Sagan, but then somebody else, took it from his book into the screenplay. They knew woo-woo.
Oh,
Would
absolutely.
you agree?
Absolutely, 100%. There's many movies like that. I mean, the original Star Wars, the Jedi Knights, the whole woo-woo culture of Yoda and what he's teaching, like, that's not new. In the US, we think it's new and crazy, right? But other cultures have been thinking about all this woo-woo for millennia. It's, ancient cultures had spiritual leaders all over the world. So we just are, we think we're so civilized over here when if you look at it, maybe we're not that civilized because we've lost touch with our woo-woo. And we need to bring that back into our lives to get in touch with the collective consciousness so we can see the compassion and care for each other that we've lost.
Well, and ancient drawings in caves in Europe and Egypt and places like that. I mean, they got like star people on the walls and starships. Well, why would they draw that if they didn't see it?
Exactly.
Kind of a
Very
thing.
spiritual symbolism in many of I love ancient art. I love ancient cultures. I love all that stuff.
Yeah, I
Um,
do too. It's fascinating.
Very fascinating.
I agree. Okay. Thank you for going down that rabbit hole with me. This stuff I love to talk about. Does everybody have the ability to communicate with spirit? Are we all doing it whether we're aware of it or not?
I believe everybody has the ability if they choose to do it. I think you have to have your mind open to a certain degree in order to do it. And some people are closed off. Like there are people I know that are there's just a block, nothing spiritual's coming in. They're complete atheists. I've worked with many scientists who are this way. I know people in my personal life who are this way. You have to open up that area of your mind to allow it to happen. But I think if they did, it would happen. I think everybody can do it if they work on it. I teach classes and I've taken students from, absolutely no connection to working them through, raising their awareness. And then they're like getting all this evidence and they're like, I don't know how I did it. I'm like, because you did the work and you allowed it to happen.
Yeah, you raise your vibrational level. Why is it that scientists are so closed-minded on things outside of their little boxes? Why is that?
I love this question, and I'm so glad you asked it. I talk about this all the time. Ego, ego, ego. Because if I didn't think of it, if I can't touch it, it can't be real. And this harms science. It harms it because scientists should be the most open-minded people in the world because you're supposed to follow the evidence. And if you don't follow the evidence, if you're like, nope, I don't want to look at that evidence, you're not doing science. Because when you have psychics and mediums all over the world who have gotten so much evidence in so many different ways, I mean, the US government has studied this for decades.
And they have mediums and psychics in all of the agencies, all the intelligence agencies, all the military intelligence agencies. Well, hell, industry has it.
Yeah.
Microsoft has it, Apple has it, Google has it. They all have psychics and mediums that are helping them develop new product lines and things like that. Okay, let's switch directions for a second. What's an evidential medium?
An evidential medium is like an evidential scientist. We gather evidence in our readings that's not something so common that it could apply to anyone. Like your grandma loved you, she gave you a kitten for your birthday, or you used to sit on her lap and she would sing you songs. Like that's super common. That evidence could apply in certain circumstances, but you also have to have evidence that's unusual, evidence that's not too obvious, something that's a deeper layer. I'll give an example. Speaking of grandmas, I was giving a reading to a lady. Her grandma made her aware, came into my awareness, and I saw a wedding tool, piles and piles and piles of wedding tool. And I said, she's showing me piles of wedding tool.
Tool
And
the fabric.
the fabric, right? Fabric. And she was a wedding dress seamstress her whole career.
Oh, I love that.
So now there's no way I would know that.
Right.
That's a really unusual piece of evidence to bring forward in a reading. Another was a young boy who I said, I see your son, he passed. I see your son with Woody and Jessie from Toy Story. And the mom sent me a picture after the reading of him at Disney World with Woody and Jessie from Toy Story. Now, I wouldn't know that any other way. So those are just a couple of examples of evidence that is accurate and not something that's plastered all over social media, because nowadays we have the internet, and some people do cheat. That is something you would have no way of knowing, or how they passed in a very, I was giving a reading earlier today and the person said their liver exploded. And I'm like, I've never seen somebody's liver explode, but he may be just being very dramatic. And he had liver disease and then got hepatitis. And so his liver exploded, not for real, but it was what
It was
took
a
his life.
metaphor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
metaphorically, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the wedding tool, I had a client recently in the past couple of days, and we were talking with her grandmother who was Irish. And she was showing me this very fine Irish lace. And I said, looks like a dresser scarf to me, or one of those pieces of lace that they'd put on a table or on their dresser in their bedroom. And she said, my grandmother made that. They were dresser scarves made out of lace. I still have them. She had them on all her dressers. She had them on her end tables. It was a thing at the turn of the century. Again, some of this stuff comes in and it's random. And you and I have to learn to say, okay, this makes no sense to me, but I'm just going to say it, even if I'm wrong. And it doesn't mean anything to them because 99.999% of the time it does.
And even if they can't take it in that moment,
Correct.
those are my favorite when they have to go find out from somebody else.
Yeah.
Then they email me back and say, "Oh my gosh, you were right." I had one the other day, a lady, I kept saying, "Is somebody pregnant? Is somebody pregnant? I keep feeling somebody's pregnant." And she's like, "No, no, no." An hour later, she emailed me and said, "I just found out my niece just found out today she's pregnant." Things like that, which I love because the client didn't even know yet. And then they find out later, and that I love is, like, some of my favorite evidence, because I used to be afraid to give if I didn't understand it, which was silly because I was new, I would be afraid to give the evidence, and then my husband encouraged me. He's like, "Just say it. Just say it. Whatever comes in your mind, just say it." And I was like, "Okay." And so now I just say it.
Well, and I always tell people too, and it sounds like you do the same, that it may make sense to you at the moment. It may make sense later when you think about it or check it out. And it may pertain to something that hasn't happened yet.
Yes, exactly. I do. I let them know it could be. And the other thing sometimes clients don't understand, it doesn't have to have happened within 2 weeks of their passing. It could have happened 40 years ago,
Right.
and the time doesn't matter if it's a memory, um, from 40 years ago and it happened, like they'll say, "Oh, but that happened 40 years ago." Yeah, but it happened.
Yeah. Who cares? Exactly. What do you say to people who are uncomfortable or skeptical about connecting with a deceased loved one?
I get a lot of trolls, I'm sure you do too, who like to tell me, I'm going to hell and fire and brimstone. Um,
I don't get those so much anymore. I did at the
uh,
beginning, a few.
it's like when you know something so completely, nothing can rattle you. Like you love your kids. Can anybody ever change that for you? No. No. It is so completely part of who you are. That is how this is to me. I do not really care if people judge me for it. I do not really care if they don't believe it, because the people who are closest to me, who are the most important to me, support me. And that's all that really matters to me. People on the perimeter who are judgmental, people who think I'm crazy, that's not my problem. I don't I can't let that affect me, and I won't let it affect me because I truly believe the collective consciousness or source or God or however people want to define it allowed this to happen to me when it happened for a reason, because I'm supposed to help people heal. And that's the most important thing to me.
So here's how I deal somebody that says something snarky on one of my social media channels. Delete, delete, block, delete. If you have a question, that's fine. But if you're saying something snarky or you're saying something, that's offensive to me or to somebody else, I don't even go there. It's just delete. The other thing that's interesting about all of that too is I find that people don't really say anything to me about it anymore. It's very rare that I'll have somebody say something and I'll say, well, we don't have to talk about this. What do you want to talk about? football, whatever. But speaking of football, I live in Alabama and the University of Alabama, Nick
Oh, yeah.
Saban,
I'm a big sports fan myself.
Yeah. So Saban's answer to he tells this story about his players were upset because people online were really saying awful things about the team because they lost a game.
Yeah, because if you don't win every single game, you're
Well,
terrible.
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And they're kids, for God's sakes. I mean, the pros don't win every single game. So Saban, I love this. Saban says, why would you let some guy, some big old bald fat guy sitting in his underwear in his mother's basement, writing snarky things online affect you in your life? Just delete
Exactly.
it. It's not worth
Exactly.
reading. Which I thought was so funny. And I've
Keyboard
heard it said,
warriors. Keyboard warriors. They're typing from behind a mask, and it's like, "Say it to my face," you know?
what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point? Get a life. Yeah. Re-
Boredom. They're bored.
Maybe research shows connecting with the spirits of deceased loved ones can be beneficial in helping to heal grief. Have you found that to be the case?
1,000,000%. I get so many emails and so many testimonials. Um, people one lady told me a couple weeks after her reading that she was contemplating ending her life before the reading, and that hit really hard because I want to help others as much as I can. I'm not perfect. I have flaws, you know. I don't do a perfect reading every single time. That's impossible. Um, but I'm also not a trained psychiatrist. And so it's a huge responsibility. We have to really come at this with our own ethics and standards because people are hurting when they come to us and they
Right.
want answers and they want to feel better and they want to feel connected. And when you really care about what you're doing and you're really trying to help people heal or start or continue their healing journey, that's important to me and I take it really seriously. And when someone comes to me and says, I was contemplating ending my life until I had your reading, that just makes me even want to care more, do better, do more, help more,
Mhm.
because you don't know the person is a stranger on the other side of the Zoom meeting. You don't know what happened to them that day or what they're going through. You don't know their story. So it's really important for anybody out there who's doing mediumship readings, who's watching and maybe they're new or developing. We have to hold ourselves to a really high ethical standard. And if you see somebody not working ethically, privately and nicely, send them a little message because it's important because people's lives can be delicate and we don't know what they're going through when we meet them.
I agree 100% with the ethics. And there's kind of an unwritten rule, I think, with those of us that are legit that we're not going to do certain things if they don't feel right to us.
Yep.
For instance, I do a lot of healing work, energy healing work.
I've
And
seen those and they're beautiful.
well, thank you. I won't scan somebody else without their permission telepathically. And sometimes they don't give me permission, and I don't scan them because I believe it's an invasion of their privacy. And can I scan them? Absolutely. Will I? Absolutely not. And you're the same way. I know that you're the same way. So, yeah, I think it's really important with that. There's research that shows that communicating with deceased loved ones in spirit form is super healing for people who are dealing with deep grief.
Uh-huh.
And I think that more and more research is coming about with that. When you have somebody that's in deep grief and they come to you, what's your technique? How do you work with them?
So when I see them come on the screen and I can tell you can feel their energy. do a breathing exercise. Normally, I do all my breathing exercises and meditations before because I don't want to take time in the reading. People are paying for that time, so I want to give them a reading. So when they come on and I can feel that energy is just not okay, I just do some deep breathing with them. Do some deep breathing to just kind of resettle their neurological system. I have make sure they have water, very important. And I just start very slow. And I start very slow and I give them a lot of healing messages and reinforce that their loved ones are safe and at peace, that they're not in any pain, that they don't have to worry that they suffered at their passing, because I always say, with my biological background, our body goes into shock, so we really don't feel anything, even if it's tragic. The soul can leave the body before, if it knows in 5 seconds I'm gonna get hit by a car, and my soul can leave my body first. Um, and then sometimes if they're still not feeling okay, I'll just stay on with them. I'll just stay on and stay on until, like if I have another appointment, say in 20 minutes, for example, I'll stay on as long as I have to make sure they're okay. And I just ask them, are you okay? Can I help you with anything else? And, just with my education background, teaching for 20 years in the classroom, as teachers, we have to do a lot of that. You're
Yeah.
mothering it as a teacher a lot. So it's kind of like that. You just have to make sure they're okay, because you don't want to hang up from a reading and then find out later something very bad happened.
Mhm.
So I'll talk them down, calm them, help get them in as calm of a state as I can. I'll ask if they have a therapist, if there's somebody I can contact for them. Those are extreme cases.
I was gonna
That's
say, are those people who are agitated after you're talking with their loved ones in spirit? Is that very common?
No, 1 in 500 maybe.
Okay. Yeah,
They'll
I
be
don't run into
no,
that either.
no,
Yeah.
1 in 500. Usually it's a parent who may have booked a reading too soon, but you don't know that
Talk
when
about that. What's too soon?
Well, I say 3 to 6 months after a tragic loss, they should wait, because we need to heal a little bit mentally, so we're not in such a state of severe grief that the reading may do more harm than good. So I always recommend people wait 3 to 6 months. Now, I can't control when they book a reading, it could be the next day. Um, and so those are the cases I was referring to earlier. If they're in severe grief, I kinda talk them through it as much as I can. Um, but it is not because the spirit can't come through. Both my first 2 experiences we talked about earlier were the day the person passed. So the spirit can come through immediately, as you know, and even prior, I'm sure prior to passing, they can come through.
All the time.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter if they're attached to a body or not, it's irrelevant.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, because of the oversoul and, the quantum, matter of the soul. So yeah, I if you're in severe grief, you should not get a reading right away. Just 3 to 6 months is what I recommend. It's what the mediums I've worked with recommend. I don't know if you recommend the same thing?
I don't, and I've had people call into my show when they've had a loved one. I've had a couple people that come to mind that called in the day that their loved one passed, and we got them on the line and their spirit, and it was so comforting to them. I mean, and they, like you, they sent me an email later and they said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." My God, it was the most comforting thing. Suzanne Wilson, our colleague Suzanne Wilson, she's been on the show, and she has people wait. I think she said it's either 6 months or a year before she'll do another reading with them, because she said sometimes the bereaved get addicted
Yes.
to using mediums to talk with their loved ones, and she
Yes.
said, "I don't wanna encourage that," and I said, "Well, there are only about a bazillion of us, so they can go to somebody else," and she laughed, and she said, "You're right," but she said, "I don't have to participate in that." And do you
I
find that
agree with
the
that.
case?
I agree with that. I've had to tell some of my clients that would book a reading every month, and it's for the same person in spirit, and there's only so much you can say and get. There's a lot of repetitive information, and it's like I always say, wait 3 months. Wait 3 months. Because unless it's for a different loved one in spirit, that's a different story. If today you wanna talk to dad and in a month you wanna talk to your brother, those are 2 totally different readings. But if you always want to talk to the same person over and over again, 3 months minimum in between, I recommend.
Do you find that when you're communicating with spirit that they're gonna give you similar things to convey to your clients? Meaning they're gonna talk about similar things like, "Here's a sign you can that I'm sending you," or "Here's something that's happening in your life," or "Here's something I want you to tell somebody else." Do you find that there's a pattern to that with the spirits
From
with whom you
you mean
communicate?
different clients with do you mean
They're
different clients meeting different people?
correct. So, Susie comes in and she wants to talk to her granddad, and Sally comes in and Sally wants to talk to her deceased nephew, and somebody else comes in. I mean, do they have, like they talk about the family, and then they talk about something that's going on in the client's life, and then they talk about something else? Do you see patterns in
I
what they
don't
have to
really.
say?
I
Okay.
don't really see a pattern. I feel that every reading is very unique, and I use different clairs.
Meaning?
So clairvoyance, clairvoyance, clairseeing, clairaudience, clairhearing, claircognizance, clairknowing. I have a lot of clairsentience, a lot of feeling in my body of pains and things. So when a new medium may be trained, they may just be using clairvoyance, clairseeing. But the more clairs you develop, the more dynamic your readings will be and the more information you'll get. All of my readings are very different. They're not the same, I don't get, I never tell people what signs they're getting unless it's like a flashing light. My lamp will flash during a reading, and I know to tell them, look for the flashing light. Um, but yeah, my readings are very different. The information is almost never the same.
Can you give us some examples of a reading that you did with a client and the types of information that came in?
Aside from the wedding tool and all of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, yeah. So you're
um,
talking to grandma, she shows you the wedding tool, then what does she have to say after that?
there was a birth certificate projected on my wall. That was interesting, and I asked the client, I said, "Do you understand why I'm seeing this birth certificate?" She said, "Actually, I do, because my name was spelled wrong on my birth certificate, and I've just been trying to get that fixed this week."
Yeah.
You know, things like that. Um, I today felt a massive heart attack in my reading, and the person I was communicating with passed from a massive heart attack.
Mhm.
Um, I hear I see words spelled out in my head a lot. Like, it'll say, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I connect with people who have a lot of addiction in my family history, and, so I feel like because that's in my database, I pull in a lot of clients not knowing, spirit does it, because I can relate to stories around addiction and how that affects families and people. Um, and also for some reason, I find that a lot of people who have taken their own life, I get a lot of clients with people who've taken their own life, and they'll show me that. I also can feel like getting shot in the chest. I felt that before. People
Wow.
yeah. So I can feel it and see it at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, just literally, there's just so many different pieces of evidence. It's literally anything you.
I know. I'm the same way, and it's so funny, Nicole, because I always say, "I think spirits all have ADD," because they don't talk to us in a linear format. It's like, here's the tool, and here's the birth certificate, and here's a car, and here's like a lasagna recipe, and you're going, what? How did these relate? And they don't, other than they're pieces to send to your client to let them know it's really them with whom we're conversing.
That
Yeah.
happened to me in my reading earlier. It was a bunch of random information like that, and the client said, "None of those things go together, but they're all things that mean something." And that's, great. It's funny that you just said that because the reading before I popped on here for this conversation, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, yeah. I get that a lot. And then the information comes in pretty fast. I find that when it reminds me of an old-fashioned water well pump, you gotta pump it a little bit and start the conversation, and then they get really chatty. Do you find the same thing?
Most of the time, because I sit in the power before every reading, even if I do 3 or 4 in a row, I take a few minutes to do that. Most of the time, they'll pop right in my awareness, and they'll start giving me information. I write it down on my notepad, and then I log on with the client, and I do my intro, and then I just blah, 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 start. Sometimes I find, and you may find this too, if they have some shame around their passing, sometimes they'll hold back a little, and then they'll give me a couple things, and then they'll pull back a little. And that usually for me indicates in some way, either purposefully or accidentally, they were responsible for their passing, or they harmed themselves for so long with bad habits that it led to their passing. That's my experience.
Interesting. So, what is your technique? It sounds like you do a prep before each client or before your day starts with your clients that are perhaps having appointments in a row and in a sequence on your calendar. So, give us an idea of what you do to
I come
tune
into
in.
my office, I burn some sage, I clear, the area, set up intention to clear out any negativity. Um, I do my hair and makeup.
Because you're going to be on camera.
And I listen to hemisync music. And I'll watch some near-death experience videos. Sometimes I'll just watch interviews with people talking about mediumship just to kind of get my mind there. Because, a lot of having your own small business is a lot of paperwork and a lot of emails and a lot of busy work. And you want to be in the zone when you're doing your readings. So I just get myself prepared mentally as much as I can, and then I set a timer for about 10 minutes before the reading, and I say, "Dear God, angels, saints, loved ones, and spirits, please allow me to connect with loved ones in spirit for so and so. Please allow me to bring forward evidence that their loved ones in spirit still exist beyond this earthly realm. Please allow me to bring forward messages of hope, healing, peace, and love." And probably about halfway through that, they pop in my head and start,
Beautiful.
yeah, giving me information.
Giving you
And
downloads.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you then disconnect?
I try to do that when I'm finishing up the reading, because usually I do several in a row,
Mhm.
and I have to go into a new meditation for the next. So I will just thank them. Thank you for coming into my awareness. Thank you for delivering evidence and messages, and just kind of, I don't wanna say push their energy back, but allow them to disconnect and let them know, they know I'm about to do another reading. So they're aware. And then I, tie up all loose ends with the client, and then, take a little stretch break, and then go into my meditation for my next reading. Um, and so, but I also like to clear the air between the readings. So, because, I'm sure you've experienced this, some spirits just want to stick around and hang out. Some of them want to hang out, and I'm like, but you can't hang out with me right now because I got another client. And some want
So
to,
go outside and play.
yeah, yeah. Have you ever experienced that where they're just kind of lingering? I feel like
I have not.
oh, okay.
No.
I've had that happen.
But they probably like you better than they like me.
It's the plants. They like my plants.
Perhaps. Or the sage, maybe. How did you choose your mentor and teacher? What was that?
I went on YouTube because I didn't know what else to do because
Yeah.
this was so foreign to me. I knew about paranormal stuff. I watched Ancient Aliens and, paranormal stuff through the years. But I had seen like Teresa Caputo's show. I had seen that in the past. So I knew kind of what it was, but I didn't really know. So I went on YouTube and I watched several different mediumship teachers, or so some of them claim to be. And some of them would like talk for an hour and not say anything. And I'm like, I just wasted an hour of my life. And then I found a mentor that gave so much information in such a short period of time. I'm like, she was very real. She was very real and very matter of fact. And she talked about science. She's not a scientist, she was a nurse. So she had a scientific background as well. And so I'm like, this is the one for me. And I went on her website, sent her an email, signed up, and she was a very, very good mentor. I learned a lot from her.
And now you're teaching people.
Exactly. Yeah. And then she taught me how to teach mediumship as well.
Perfect. I love it. Last question. Why do we incarnate?
To grow closer to source, to learn the lessons, the hard lessons, to suffer so we can grow closer to source, to have as many challenges here, depending on, everyone's life is different, but most of the people I know have had challenges in their life. I don't think I know somebody that's had a purely restful, wonderful life. Even if they say so on TV. Our whole purpose, in my opinion, is to grow our soul and mature our soul and get closer to God or source.
Great answer. Yeah. You are a fabulous combo platter, my girl, of brilliance and scientific, brilliance, and the being able to join that with the spiritual and merge the two and meld the two. And I can see why your clients love you so much, because you're coming at it from a practical, scientific standpoint, and here's the emotional, spiritual side of the equation. And so it's really, I think, nurturing both of those areas in all of us, where we want to have that proof. We want to have somebody who's legit talking to us. And we also want that evidence that it's really our loved one with whom we're communicating. So yeah, what a wonderful, wonderful combination of all of those skill sets that you've been able to merge. How can people learn more about you and your work and your classes and all of that?
Well, if people are interested in watching, just a little bit about me, you can go on my YouTube channel at Peaceful Nik, Nik. It'll all be linked below, I'm sure, in the description of the video here. My website is peacefulnikthemedium.com, or you can email me at peacefulnikthemedium@gmail.com. I'm on most of the socials. There are some copycats, so you have to be careful for that. And if you have any questions, I'm always available to answer questions. I answer tons of questions by email. And I love helping people and teaching people mediumship so they can help others as well.
All right. Sounds good. Everybody, we've given you lots to think about today. In the meantime, we're sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama, mwah, and from Florida, too, where Nicole is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.